Recording in progress.
Hey, sweet faces. We are taking a look at adding decimals this week and a few reminders. We're looking at adding and subtracting, actually, to be specific. Few reminders: line up your decimals, not your digits. Fill in any empty spaces with my favorite number, 0. Drop your decimal into your answer and add them. So when we're setting this one up, they both have the same amount of digits. So we need to make sure that we line up our decimal and the decimal goes straight down into our answer. And then we add 4 and 6 is 10. 8 and 6 and 1 is 15. 6 and 3 is 9, and 1 is 10. 8, 9, 10. Our answer is 10 and 50 hundredths. Or you could also say that this is 10 and 5 tenths. Both of those would be correct. 26 and 44 hundredths, we're adding this to 64 and 14 hundredths. Notice I line up my decimals. I put my decimal directly down into my answer. 4 and 4 is 8, 4 and 1 is 5, 6 and 4 is 10, 6 and 2 is 8, add 1 is 9. 90 and 58 hundredths. 74 and 77 hundredths, adding that to 97 and 84 hundredths, lining up my decimals, putting my decimal into my answer. 7 and 4 is 11. 7 and 8 and 1 is 16. 7 and 4 add 1 is 12. And 17, 172 and 61 hundredths. Lining up my decimals. 76, putting my decimal down into my answer and adding for this one, I got 47 and 31 hundredths. Lining up my decimals, dropping my decimal down into my answer. For this one, I get 150 and 6 hundredths. And our last one on this page, I get 90 and 7 hundredths. Any questions, please bring them with you to class. If you are ready for the next page, hang tight because here we go. Page number 2, we are still adding decimals. Remember to line up your decimals. Fill in any empty spaces with my favorite digit, which is 0. Drop your decimal into your answer and add them up. So for this one, we have both 2-digit numbers, which is fantastic. Decimal down, 1 and 85 hundredths. Add carefully, but most importantly, make sure your decimal is lined up. 13 and 86 hundredths. Now this one. Notice we have an empty space with a 0. It doesn't change the value, but it helps me match up the numbers correctly. Decimal down into my answer, 79 and 72 hundredths. If you did not have a brain match with me on this question, make sure that your 4s were matched. Look at where our decimals are. This one only has 1 digit before the decimal. This has 2. Make them balanced. 78 hundredths plus 34 hundredths. 1 and 12 hundredths. Here's another one where we have an unbalanced equation. 0 for the win, 58 and 44 hundredths. Another unbalanced equation keeping you on your toes. 0 is our hero. 70 and 82 hundredths. Any questions? Go ahead and bring them with you to class. If you are ready for your next page, here comes subtracting. Hang tight. Here we go. Subtracting is very, very similar. We line up our decimals. We fill in our empty spaces with zeros. We drop our decimal into the answer. The only difference is now we have to subtract. So flip your thinking. Remember, we need to borrow if we don't have enough. So make sure you're being careful, okay? When we subtract this, we get 10 and 48 hundredths. If you got a bigger number than that, check to make sure that you subtracted instead of added. Next one, we get 6 and 4 hundredths. If you got something bigger, make sure that you borrow, because right here, I cannot do 3 minus 7. I have to come next door to borrow. 76 and 41 hundredths, subtracting 68 and 82 hundredths. When I subtract that, I get 7 and 59 hundredths. Right here is my reason to borrow. Remember, borrowing is super important. 63 and 51 hundredths, subtracting 47 and 34 hundredths, I get 16 and 17 hundredths. I do have a borrow in that second place value. 93 and 39 hundredths, taking away 45 and 94 hundredths. This is going to leave me with 47 and 45 hundredths. Last one for this page, 67 and 37 hundredths, subtract 24 and 45 hundredths. We do have one situation for borrowing right here. So watch your math, decimal down, 42 and 92 hundredths. Any questions with this? Please bring them with you to class. This time we are going between adding and subtracting. So I would go through and make sure that you know what you're being asked to do. It's no fun when you have to do the problem again because you made a mistake. All right, first one we're subtracting. 59 and 67 hundredths minus 11 and 37 hundredths. This gives me 48 and 30 hundredths. 4 and 54 hundredths plus 74 hundredths. This gives me 5 and 28 hundredths. 3 and 99 hundredths plus 2 and 28 hundredths. That gives me 6 and 27 hundredths. 7 and 23 hundredths, subtract 28 and 57 hundredths. I'm left with 41 and 66 hundredths. Right here is a borrow. Right here is a borrow. Right here is a borrow. This one was super duper sticky. Be careful. Be careful. Okay? Down to our next subtraction. 42 and 46 hundredths, subtract 13 and 18 hundredths. This leaves us with 29 and 28 hundredths. We had two borrowing situations. Last one is adding 29 and 61 hundredths. Add that to 86 and 94 hundredths. Leaves us with 116 and 55 hundredths. Last page again, we're going between adding and subtracting. So make sure you know what is being asked of you, whether you circle your sign, you highlight it, you underline it. I would somehow make sure that it stands out so that you're not having to do a question more than once. All right, friends, adding these together, I get 53 and 74 hundredths. Let's rewrite this. 89 and 24 hundredths, subtract 10 and 79 hundredths. Let's look through this because we had a double borrow here, okay? So 4 minus 9 I can't do. I go next door and make it a 1 and I borrow. 14 minus 9 is 5. 1 minus 7 I can't do. I go next door and I borrow. 11 minus 7 is 4. Decimal. 8 minus 0 is 8. 8 minus 1 is 7. 7 and 45 hundredths. For this one, easy peasy lemon squeezy. 7 and 7 is 0. 2 and 1 is 1. It is 10 hundredths or 1/10, however you want to read it. This one we are adding. We are left with 72 and 7 hundredths. 3 and 42 hundredths, add 24 hundredths. You're left with 3 and 66 hundredths. And 48 and 69 hundredths, subtract 35 and 39 hundredths. We're left with 13 and 30 hundredths. Any questions, please bring them with you to class.